In our first lesson, we'll discuss some of the struggles of life, how to manage them, some good Bible ideas, because at times life does feel overwhelming. I'll simply remind you by way of introduction, this ain't heaven. And don't try to make this heaven. I don't want you to run into troubles purposely. That would be foolish. But when they arise, just remind yourself, this ain't heaven. Furthermore, there is no one simple magical answer. There is this crazy idea in our society that if I can find that one magical answer, or maybe I could turn lead into gold, it's some kind of a happiness alchemy or something or another. No, it doesn't work that way. I think in 6,000 years, if there was one magical simple answer to make all of our troubles just kind of evaporate, I think we'd have found it by now. What do you think? 6,000 years is a long time. And I think probably about everybody in life's been looking for that for about 6,000 years. However, it's not all in vain. There's some purpose going on here in the training. There are things to learn. There's gain to be had. And there's a bazillion victories along the way. I think it's kind of funny, and we all do this. We lose track of all the victories we've had. And it doesn't take very long past a victory, and you've already forgot it. Now, I've said it this way recently. I'm going to say it this way again. You have survived every single thing life has thrown at you to this very date. Now let me reword that. Every one of those things you survived to this very date, that's a victory. Man, if you were writing those down, if you'd started writing those down, keeping a journal of all your victories, let's say when you were 6 years old, whenever you learned to write, you would have volumes full of all your victories. And you'd look back at some of them from an adult point of view, when you looked at the ones that happened when you were 10 or 16, and you'd giggle and you'd almost be embarrassed that you wrote them down as a struggle. But they were at the time. They really were. And it's still a victory because at that time, that's all you knew. And so here's another rule, and I'll get on with my lesson because I've got like 5 points. We'll hit them all in reasonable time. And that is, do not expect your 6-year-old self to understand what your 50-plus-year-old self understands. Don't expect your 25-year-old self back there to understand what your 50-plus-year-old self understands. Life is a journey, and you learn things as you go, and you develop, and you gain new understanding. And if you go back and you judge your past 30-year-old self based on what your 60-year-old self knows, your 30-year-old self's going to fail every single time. Don't do that. It doesn't work that way. You learn. You learn. You learn. You go, okay, now I know some more. Let's keep moving forward. So how do you manage some of these struggles? Well, we're going to talk about lay aside the unnecessary weights for a moment. Hebrews 12:1. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So every weight you can carry doesn't need to be carried. You just don't have to carry it. You really need to look at the things you're thinking about, worried about, pondering, whatever, and go, whoa, wait a minute. Is this really worth my time? Is this where I want to invest my life right now? Because if I give a situation 10 minutes of my life, that's 10 minutes I will never, ever, 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 ever get back. I invested it in it. Now, if it was a total waste, then why do that? Now, if it's significant and important, then that's where I want to invest my time. So I want to be a participant. I want to run, but I want it in the right place. And I really don't want to end up at the end of life going, well, I was just a spectator. Now, there are times to be a spectator, and there are things to stay out of, but you just need to make that evaluation. Is this really a weight I need to carry? Now, we're going to run through this as a long list. Actually, it takes 3 slides here. And we're just going to run up. I'm a preacher, so I'm not going to comment on these. Now, you know that's a lie already. So the trick is to keep the comments really, really super short. So idolatry. Anything that sets itself above God, get rid of it. You don't need to keep that. Murder. Of course, most of you go like, murder? I'm not a murderer. Well, yes, you are. John 3:15 says hate is equal to murder. Have you ever hated anyone? You're a murderer. Theft. Material, immaterial. I think we probably should focus on immaterial a little bit more because you can steal a lot of things that you can't hold in your hand. Like you can steal someone's reputation. You can steal time from your employer. You can steal happiness from your children. There's just a lot of ways to steal stuff. Lying. Misleading statements, avoiding the truth. Man, could we unpack that one, especially about lying to yourself? You know, he says liars are condemned. It doesn't say it's okay to lie to yourself. You don't lie. And that means you look brutally in the mirror at yourself too. Coveting, envying what somebody else has, being resentful that somebody else has it, being bitter. I heard a teacher, this was actually, Sharon, I don't remember this name. This was Miss Edelman. This was Southside High School. She taught Arkansas history. And she was a fun, jolly teacher. And she was talking about some of the wealthy people in times past and how they were resented. And then she made a comment that has just stuck with me. Why these comments stick with you, I have no idea. But this one stuck with me. She says, I don't know why they resent it. What that person did was prove that it's possible for me to live a better life too. I'm kind of like, well, that's right. You know, so instead of resenting the people that are successful and out there getting it done, look at them and go, man, how did they do it? I can do better too. Don't covet. Drunkenness, alcohol, drugs, even legal drugs. And legal drugs, what your doctor wrote your prescription out for, can be just as sinful as what you would buy down on the street corner from somebody that you don't want to buy that. Sexual immorality, of course, covers a broad spectrum of things and has been one of the most popular sins that need to be laid aside since the beginning of mankind. This good old-fashioned pride, which comes in a dozen different ways. Greed, again, not just money, but you can be greedy over a variety of things. Dishonoring parents and authorities, man, we could unpack that one for a while. Then we go to anger, throwing a fit. Anger is a little funny because it says be angry and do not sin. So it's not that anger is wrong, but there is behavior there that's wrong. So you want to get rid of it. Is it really worth your anger? Selfish ambition, using people, neglecting them, trying to manipulate people all the time so you get your own agenda. Divisiveness, sowing discord, stirring up trouble. Somebody, I don't know what term's in vogue now, but for a long time we call them button pushers. And they knew just exactly what to say to upset a certain person, and then they would do it for their own entertainment. Don't do that. Gluttony, and not just food. Now, obviously, food you need to learn to control, but you can get issues with, let's say, social media. Too much time spent in social media. It's not that social media is a sin any more than food is a sin. But what do you want to do? Stand before the judgment seat of Christ and go, Lord, did you see all the likes I had on my Facebook page? Man, we had it going on there. I was showing them all the things I was doing in my life, and people, I just had thousands and thousands. That's really not what I want to stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an account of. There's a way. Now, don't get rid of your Facebook if you're on the Facebook or some social media. Just don't become a glutton about it. Gossip, absolutely. Get rid of your gossip. Murmuring, complaining, criticizing just for the sake of doing it. Get rid of that. You're not doing anybody any good, not doing yourself any good. Ungratefulness, ingratitude. We have so much to be blessed about. And I don't know why it's this way, but it is this way. You can have 100 things in your life that are awesome where people in other countries they can't even imagine walking over to the thermostat and setting it so you can be comfortable at whatever temperature you want. And then we'll turn around and whine and complain and be ungrateful because our favorite show is not on TV. And there's a lot of folks in the world that don't even have a TV. It's crazy what we'll do. Unforgiving, holding on to grudges, don't do that. Let that one aside. Hypocrisy, the good old standard, double standard. Biblical ignorance, get rid of that one. And that's easy to get rid of. Fear and anxiety, you want the peace that passes understanding. That's your Philippians 4 and 6. Learn to get that one. Negative self-talk, big major problem. Philippians 4:13 is where I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But, psychologists say, and I agree with this for the most part, that if we put a speaker on top of your head and listen to the way you talk to yourself all the time, we'd lock you up. Because try to do it. Listen to yourself, talk to yourself. How often you go, well, you dummy, why'd you do that? Well, that was stupid of you. You're just no good. And some people get even harsher than that, just beating themselves down over and over and over. No, if you made a mistake, correct it and move on. That's okay. And then just distractions. And I should have put the word moral distractions on that. Because 1 Corinthians 10:23, he says, all things are legal, but not all things are profitable. All things are legal, but not all things edify. Just because it's moral doesn't mean God's waiting up in heaven to give you a trophy for doing it. Think that one out a second. Let me say it one more time, then we'll move on to our next slide. Just because it's moral doesn't mean God is sitting in heaven with a trophy waiting to give you for doing it. We are workers in the vineyard. We are soldiers of Christ. We are the ones that work our community. If we're not working our community, but 99.9% of our time was in a moral area watching Andy Griffin, I couldn't condemn that. I'm not going to get a trophy for watching every Andy Griffin episode and understanding the good moral that was in it, which Andy Griffin used to do. That I kind of miss that kind of thing now. It wasn't just lame entertainment. So lay aside some weights. Look at the weights you're carrying. Go, look, do I really need to carry this? And if you don't need to carry it, drop it. Get rid of it. Now we're going to develop some patience because life is a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. So in Hebrews 10:35, he said, therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has great reward, for you have need of endurance. So when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. So we get in there and we hang in. Endurance is the key. You fall down 7 times, you get up 8 is the way the motivational speakers like to say it. And I think that's a good idea. If you're thinking you're going to run this marathon and not fall down, well, let me just be blunt. You're stupid. You're not going to do that. We're all going to be running. We're all going to trip and fall. That's what we do. What you do is like 1 John 1:9. If we say we have no sin, we have lied. Something along that line. Romans 3:23 will work. Or James 3:2. We all stumble in many things. You're gonna fall. Don't get all. How do I say this without? I don't want to justify the fall, but don't get all entangled up in it where you get so emotionally invested in the fall that you can't get back up. You don't fail unless you stay down. Now, if you stay down, you fail. But if you fall and get back up, that's all right. Well, that's what we're going to do. And so if you have that endurance, Revelation 2:10 says, be thou faithful unto, I know you just finished it, didn't it? Be thou faithful unto, I'm not even going to say the word, you know it, and you're going to get your reward. That's where it comes in, that endurance. And that endurance is just getting back up, getting back up. Think of St. Peter. He'd be a great example of somebody who stumbled many times, but he kept getting back up. So you're going to develop this patience because it's one of the goals we're working on. I know the joke is don't pray for patience, or you're going to have one of the most difficult times you've ever faced. And I know that's said as a joke, but I really believe that. You're not going to develop patience unless you face situations that require you to develop patience. So if I'm going through a day, a week, a month, and everything's just falling into place, click, 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 you know, and I'm not going to ever grow patience in that. May get a little spoiled in that, but I'm not going to grow patience in that. The only place I'm going to grow patience is when it is required to endure. So James 1:2-4, he said, consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Now, I think the New King James says produces patience. I'll let you do your own Greek study on that. And let endurance have its perfect work. So learning to develop patience in all this is part of the training. This is the process so that ultimately we can be perfect, complete, lacking nothing. There's your ultimate goal. So it's hard. And I don't think you should deny that it's hard. I think there's times that you just need to sit down and go, man, this is hard. Now, if you have somebody you can talk to, that's great too. They go, man, this is hard. and have a little discussion. Sometimes we just need to vent a little bit. We just need a shoulder to lean on. We just need somebody to talk to. And admittedly, the women are better at that than the men. It's kind of hard to find men who really want to talk about substantive things. Now, men do this. Listen to them. Listen to them in the foyer. What are they talking about? Did you see that ball game last night? Listen to the substance of what men talk about. Listen to them at work if you're around them at work. Listen to them at other places, like a coffee shop. Coffee shop's kind of funny. They just tell the same story over and over and over and over again. I mean, it is a nice little social time, but it's not substantive. You women, y'all get down to substance, and that's good. So it's hard. It is hard, but we can do it. God created us to do this. So we're going to keep developing that patience. We're going to be like Job, we count those blessed who endured. You've heard of the endurance of Job. We're in James 5:11. So we're talking about Old Testament character, but he's our example. So don't run from it. Something's hard. Run to it. Train through it. Y'all go, this is all training. I still love that phrase. I'm going to have to get me a t-shirt or a hat. No, I don't wear hats, but a t-shirt says it's all training. Well, what's in this lesson for me? Well, what's life trying to teach me? If it's all a process and God's involved providentially and through His Word and all that thing, then what's the lesson in this for me? What am I supposed to be learning here? And I think you really just need to sit down sometimes and go, what am I supposed to be learning here? And maybe make a list. Now, you don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but you really need to break this thing down. What am I supposed to be learning? And don't be too global, too general about that. Get really specific about you. And then when you have the obstacles in the path, don't whine about them too much, because they are frequently the path. The obstacles, not always, but a lot of times, they're the stair step up to something a little bit higher that we desire. So develop that patience. Be like Paul. I press on to the goal. Keep pressing on. You're laying up treasures in heaven. That's the ultimate thing. This is just a pilgrimage, 1 Peter 2:11. It is going to come to an end. I'll guarantee you that. And most of us in this auditorium, with the exception of a couple of youngsters, can see the end in sight. We are past the halfway mark. We are past the 3/4 mark. And if you use Psalm 90:10, where he says you get 70 to 80, some of you might be on bonus time by now. Yeah, it's going to end. So be working on that. So keep your eye on the leader is our third point. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. That's Hebrews 12:2. Just point blank says it right there. So Christ came down from heaven, took the form of a servant, a bondservant, and then suffered death, even death of the cross, Philippians chapter 2, because he saw the victory on the other side. He saw that big picture. So that's what we want to do. His struggle wasn't in vain. It wasn't a wasted effort. And our struggle doesn't have to be in vain. We can get with the program and we can gain along the way. It's just up to us. It's a choice that you and I make. Let's talk about Peter just a second. He's walking on the water. We're in Matthew 14:29. And in verse 30, he took his eyes off Jesus. And he saw the wind and he became frightened. And that's what happens. We take our eyes off the Lord and we start thinking, oh, this is too much for me. And we're right. We're 100% correct. This is too much for me. But Philippians 4:13 reminds me it's not all me. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things by myself. No, right. Through Christ who strengthens me. And then we'll say something nice, and I agree with this. 1 plus God is majority. And we'll go, yeah, isn't that great? But then when we face our own personal struggle, all of a sudden we're like, well, this is different. No, it's not. You're just being a crybaby. So don't take your eyes off Jesus. Keep your eyes there. So quick 3 things to keep you focused. Feed on the Word. If it's going to be a lamp to your feet, Psalms 119, 105, then you got to know how to use the lamp, know how to use it. Don't just dabble in it. And that is one of the problems we face. Too many of our people who profess to follow Jesus couldn't open up that book and tell you any more than a goat could tell you about that book. Number two, worship and praise. Not just in the assembly, but all the time. When you go about your business, turn your radio off in your car for 15 minutes going somewhere and sing whatever song you know. And if you don't know all the words, make them up. That'll be okay. Just the praise and the joy that's in your own heart, and focus on God. Don't restrict it to the assemblies. We don't get that much time here. If you'll put that on the clock, we don't get that much time here. Talk with others. James 5:16 says, confess your sins one to another. Pray for one another, you may be healed. Now, I do want to say, be selective, be discreet. And things vary. If you want to talk about some grandparenting things, okay, there's some people my age that may be a good source. I wouldn't spend much time talking to Archer about how to be a good grandparent. Now, I think one of these days he'll be a good grandparent, but what's his experience level right now? But if I had some issues and I wanted to understand the younger mindset of kids, and what's going on, I would definitely talk to Archer and Matt. Man, they'd be high on my list there, right? So be aware of who you're talking to when you're talking, and be discreet. You don't want to tell just anybody anything. So I'm trusting you to use your own common sense. Put difficulties into perspective. Is it really a mountain or is it just a molehill? Because how many times have you done this? You've been in the middle of something and this is just like, oh man, if I don't do this right now, the world's going to come to an end. And you just put all this crazy energy into it. You make a fool of yourself. And then 2 days later, you're going, oh man, I don't show my face anymore. Because it wasn't that big of a deal, was it? But we've all done it, haven't we? And so sometimes you just need to get your attitude adjusted. And Hebrews 12:3 and 4 will adjust your attitude as far as struggle and difficulties go. Let me just start at the top here, Hebrews 12:3. Or consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself. It's talking about Christ. So that you will not grow weary and lose heart. You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin. I'm like, okay, that will put you in perspective. Because I know I've done it too. I've sat on the pew, and as I get a little older, it just gets a little harder to get comfortable, and I'm wiggling around a little bit, and the preacher gets a little long-winded, and I'm thinking, man, I wish you'd wrap this up. I'm suffering here. Isn't that's laughable as we use it as an illustration. Because, man, wouldn't you love it that your biggest suffering point in life was a long-winded preacher and he went 10 minutes too long? That would be like a picnic for a lot of folks. I don't know what you're suffering, but I know it could be worse. And I say that with the awareness that I know some people suffer some really, really serious stuff. It is really, really hard. But if you'll think about it, it could be worse. Now, let me keep it simple right now. You could be suffering whatever it is you're suffering in a third world country and not have any of the resources available to you that you have here. Think about that. It could be worse. Get an attitude adjustment. Now, don't be irresponsible. Go ahead and address what you need to address, but don't let that problem grow bigger than it really is. So remember Jesus' example, and he did come to suffer for us. Read Hebrews 11, that Hall of Fame of faith and all the stuff they suffered, and that was pretty brutal stuff in some of those cases. Focus on eternity. Look beyond the tombstone. Man, you're the way that the popular saying is, you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. The idea is when this body dies, you keep going. And you do. And so you want that eternal perspective, not just a here to the tombstone perspective. And then 2 Corinthians 4:17, our momentary light affliction. Now, we don't have time to go here, but you need to go from light affliction to 2 Corinthians 11:24, where Paul lists the sufferings of his light affliction. And it puts it in a whole new perspective. So we look at the things which, we don't look at the things that are seen, but we look at the things which are not seen. For those things which are not seen are eternal. That's where we want to go. And number 5, this is our final one. We're going to endure the chastening and discipline of the Lord. This is all training. And so Hebrews 12:6 just tells us point blank, for those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? But if you're without discipline, all of which you become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Have you ever had somebody who's going through a hard time? I've had this happen. I'm pretty sure you probably had it happen too. They're going through a really hard time, and they're like, I don't know why God's mad at me. I don't know why he didn't love me. I don't know what I did wrong. Isn't it funny that's the place we go to? It may not be that we did anything wrong. It may be just exactly what the Hebrew writer said. God loves us. He's disciplining us. He's scourging us. Okay, don't like the idea, but that's the way training works, right? Training can be tough. It can be really, really brutal. This ain't heaven. So, got a couple more verses along that line. Proverbs 3:11. My son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord, or loathe his reproof. For whom the Lord loves, he reproves. Even as a father corrects the son in whom he delights. Revelation 3:19. Those whom I love, I reprove and discipline. Therefore be zealous and repent. So the thing to be doing is looking at it as training. And the question to ask yourself is, what's the lesson in this for me? Here's the training. So instead of running away from it, run into it. Go, God's got this. He's smarter than I am. Amen. And so I want to get on board with him. I want to understand everything. He's trying to teach me something. What is the lesson he's trying to teach me? Now, if I were going to some specific training, I would go to the training, and it would be tough. And I would be asking my coach, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to get? And so on and so forth. That's the way it works. So 3 quick suggestions here. See discipline, difficulty, struggle, suffering as a sign of God's love, not as rejection. Don't jump to rejection. Jump to love. So I'm down to 2 minutes, so let me be real quick. I had a friend once. He said, God won't let you be tested beyond what you're capable to endure. And then he paused and he said, God must not think I'm very strong. I've had an awful easy life. And I always thought, that's kind of a neat thought. You're going through some tough times. God's showing you how tough you are. Maybe you're in spiritual Navy SEAL training. Seek the wisdom to engage the training. That's James 1:5, incidentally. After he said, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, so on and so forth. Verse 5, he says, if you lack wisdom, pray for it. And then be optimistic. We signed on to train. We signed on to grow. Didn't we? Maybe you didn't. But this is what Christians really sign on for. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. So, last slide. Now I'll turn it back over to Brother Jeff. We can overcome. It is hard and it hurts. I don't want you to dismiss that. Sometimes it hurts really bad. And you recover and you keep going. So we went to the football game Friday night. We went over to Wynn. The ambulance took one player off on a stretcher. And there were 2 or 3 others that limped off. It was a tough game. And you know what? After the game was over and we went out on the field, because they still let you go out on the field over there, and they were talking to the coaches and stuff, I saw one of the last kids that got carried off coming back with his ankle wrapped up, and he was smiling and posing for pictures with all his friends. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it hurt. But in that young man's mind, that was part of the training. That's part of the experience. And if he keeps his focus, he'll take his recovery time and he'll get well and he'll be back on the field. Now, if he lets it get to him and he gets all crybaby about it, like, they weren't supposed to hurt me playing football. Football's supposed to be easy. And, his football time's over. Do you get the idea there? Every step forward counts. Everything counts, incidentally. That's another lesson. But everything counts. It's kind of like when you're eating. You ever know somebody who sneaks into the kitchen and gets a bite of cake where nobody can see them? Because it doesn't count if somebody didn't see you eat it, right? Well, that's a lie. Everything you do counts. If you oversleep, that counted. You gave up part of your day. If you eat too much junk food, that counted. You spend too much time on Facebook, that counted. You spend time worrying, fretting over something, that counted. Everything counts. Everything you spent time to do. You spent time. It counted. You gave up part of your life for it. You can play any little psychological game you want to, but it all counts, and every step forward counts. So set your mind on heaven, Colossians 3:1 and 2, and never, 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 never give up. Winston Churchill, his most famous quote, right? Don't give up. So, let's go to the song. Have you been washed in the blood? Most of you have. Stay the course and learn to manage your struggles and keep climbing higher and higher. If the struggles have knocked you off track, it's time to get back on. If you can do it privately, do it privately. If you need help publicly, we're here to help any way we can while we stand and sing.